if you're a leader, if you're a boss, if you're a manager, you need to give your employees autonomy. Okay. You're not going to give them autonomy if you don't trust them. And it starts there. And in fact, in one of my later studies, what I found was that a 67% correlation between your willingness to give autonomy and the trust that you have in your employees. Then there's the other way around, going up, accountability. Employees are not going to be willing to take risk. You use the word risk several times. So I want to take risk, and I need my employees to be able to take risk, but they're not going to do that if they don't trust me as their boss to be open-minded about it, to not make it terrible for them if they fail. Because the more you try, the more you're going to fail.
Welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast. Today, we're diving into one of the most important but often overlooked and undervalued parts of sales, which is trust. And my guest, Dr. Yoram Solomon, is a leading expert in trust building. He's a speaker and author and the host of the Trust Show podcast, so go listen to that. He spent many years researching how trust impacts buyer behavior and why some salespeople command a premium pricing model just because their customers trust them more. His books, The Trust Premium and The Book of Trust, break down exactly how trust works in business and how you can build it. So, Dr. Solomon, thank you so much for being on the Sales Gravy Podcast.
Great to be with you, Jeb. Thanks for the interest in the topic.
Well, look, this is a thing that I think that everyone intrinsically knows. I mean, we all know that trust is important in relationships. It's how we build really deep connections with other people, but building trust and that process isn't a practice that most people do every single day. They mostly just inherently do it because that's who we are as people. But you have really great practices and ideas about how you can fundamentally repeat trust in your relationships and in sales so that you can win more. So you spent 2 decades doing this. What got you interested in trust to begin with in such a way that you would write 2 books about it and start a podcast and start speaking about this topic all over the world?
Actually, by the way, you missed one digit. It's 20 books. I published 20 books. This last book, the one that you were talking about, The Trust Premium, that's book number 20. That just came out 2 months ago. I'm not going to say all 20 of them are on trust. Only 13 of them are on trust.
Only 13. Yeah, sorry. Only 13 of your books are on trust. You've only written 13 books. What got you interested in writing 13 books on trust?
Well, I think I need to go back to what were the first books about, because the first books were about creativity, specifically in organizations. That was the topic of my doctoral research. I was trying to answer the question, why are people so much more creative when they work in small startup companies than when they work in large, mature companies? Because I worked in both environments. I started companies. You probably know that on the side, I'm an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at SMU. And it always fascinated me how the level of creativity is so much higher at startups than mature companies. So I went on, did 2 years of research. And in 2 years of research, it came down to innovation culture, the culture in the organization. And that's, the first book was about technology, forecasting, entrepreneurship, new ideas. And then the fourth book was called Unkill Creativity, How Corporate America Can Out-Innovate Startups. Because once you know what the problem is, as you know, the first step in solving any problem is acknowledging that there is one. So acknowledged, understood, solved, proposed it in a book. And I remember once this was at just about the time that my 8th book came out, Culture Starts With You, Not Your Boss. So I was really fascinated with culture. And that was when I realized that trying to work on innovation is like starting to build a building from the second floor. You never start building from the second floor. Working on the culture is working on the first floor. But you don't start with the first floor either. And it was one time when that book was at the hands of the editor that I met with a company that would later be a customer to try and help them build the culture of innovation that they so desperately wanted and needed. And as I'm interviewing both the CHRO, the Chief HR Officer, and the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, as I'm interviewing them, I'm starting to realize that, they don't have the right culture. There was no doubt about that. But there was something beyond that. There was something as a foundation. And what I realized was every item that I have identified as causing or creating a good innovation culture was missing because there was a lack of trust. I went back to my dissertation. I opened it up. I looked at the really complex scheme model that I created. And all of a sudden, I noticed this block that I have put there back in 2008. And that block had one word in it, trust. And it was with a very thick line around it. And I was like, why didn't I look at this before? And as I go back through my work, I found that we need to go into this trusting, but at a later research. And so that was about the time that I decided that trust was interesting. That book, when it came back, and that was the first book where I wrote about trust, and since then, 12 more, I added a chapter, a 6-page chapter that was called, it was the epilogue, and it was called Building Trust. That was the first time I wrote about trust in a book. And by the way, this 6-page chapter never went through the editors. So by the time the book got published, all the typos, all the grammatical errors are in those 6 pages because it never went through the editor.
Oh, the joys of writing a book, right?
Yeah. And at that point, I realized that, I'm onto something. I started doing some research on trust, and I found myself in a fork in the road. Do I continue with my path of innovation that I have been going on for years, or do I switch to trust? So I asked about 20 of my closest friends and family members, people who care about me, what do you think I should do? Stick with innovation or switch to trust? 19 out of 20 said stick with innovation. So I switched to trust.
I like the risk. I like jumping off of that boat. If 19 people say go one way, you go the other way because you're an entrepreneur, you're someone who finds a place in the market for these kinds of things. And look, trust is and I think it's an innovation as well. You mentioned it's the foundation. It's not even the first floor. And I think maybe to bridge the gap a little bit as far as innovation goes, especially within organizations. I mean, we are a small organization at Sales Gravy compared to like a Comcast or NBC Universal, which has 50,000 employees or millions of employees, depending on how you count that with contractors. And I worked in that business as well. And innovation was not a premium in those organizations. You've worked in those environments as well. Yep. It's get the job done. This is the job you got to go do that thing. And that's really nice for a lot of people because it gives a lot of purpose. You can go in one direction. But when you're in a small business, there's a lot more room, but innovation is different than just taking up space. So how do you see trust in a small business space that allows organizations to out-innovate the large organizations?
Well, first of all, trust is the foundation to that culture that allows you to be more innovative. So it's the foundation to what? What I narrowed down after my initial research on culture of innovation or innovation culture, which, by the way, is why the official name of my company is the Innovation Culture Institute. And because that's where I started. And since I kind of changed the name once from the original name to Innovation Culture Institute, and I know how painful it is, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to change it again to something about trust. I'll just keep it that way. But it starts with autonomy. So you have to give if you're a leader, if you're a boss, if you're a manager, you need to give your employees autonomy. Okay? You're not going to give them autonomy if you don't trust them. And it starts there. And in fact, in one of my later studies, what I found was that a 67% correlation between your willingness to give autonomy and the trust that you have in your employees. Then there's the other way around, going up, accountability. Employees are not going to be willing to take risk. You use the word risk several times. So I want to take risk, and I need my employees to be able to take risk, but they're not going to do that if they don't trust me as their boss to be open-minded about it, to not make it terrible for them if they fail. Because the more you try, the more you're going to fail, unless you don't try. So that's where you need trust. The last one is people within the same level. So within a team, think about that. The level of creativity that you have goes to the your ability within the team to hold what I call a constructive disagreement. So a constructive disagreement is when I can ask stupid questions and not worry about what you're going to do with it. I can suggest stupid ideas and not worry about that. I can give you the feedback that you need to get, not what I think you want to hear. And unfortunately, organizations typically fall to the other side, to two other sides. It's like an upside down U shape, where in the middle, the optimal level of trust gives you the ability to hold a constructive disagreement. On one hand, we have a lot of the destructive disagreement. So this is where everything is personal, emotional, irrational. On the other side, this is where we have the politically correct disagreement. This is, where we have the meeting before the meeting after the meeting, just not the meeting during the meeting. So I found that people are 240% more likely to be, or more willing to be, vulnerable with each other if they trust each other. They're 106% more willing to give the feedback that you need to hear, not the feedback that I think you want to hear, and 76% more receptive to such feedback when they trust each other.
Wow. Okay, so then that begs the question. We have this word trust, and this is bridging into sales, because you're talking about the boss and the employee relationship, right? Or the business owner and the leader relationship, and yes, whatever that looks like. And I think you fundamentally can flip that into a sales conversation where, okay, now you need to do that with a prospect rather than your boss, and that needs to be a dynamic as well, and that U-shape is probably in play. But what is trust? Not the word. We all know what it feels like, but putting your thumb on it might be a hard thing to do. And you've been researching this for 13 books in 2 decades. What is trust, and how would you describe that so that people could understand it?
Okay. I can describe it, but people will not understand. No, that's they will. By the way, one thing that I forgot to tell you is at some point, I told you that I made that commitment to research trust and to stick with trust, but how can you tell that I made that commitment? And I don't think there is a better way than showing you that the only single tattoo I have on my body is the word trust up on my left arm. But trust me, I don't have any other tattoo anywhere else.
You can put it up on your forehead that just says, trust me. You think that would work for trust? You think people would trust
you
more?
And, when I used to have hair and you wouldn't see it. Now I can put anything up there and you will see it. But it's a great question. And first, I started looking at, I'll step back for a second. Even that decision to pursue trust as my main research topic was accompanied with a question. Do I have a different perspective on trust? I mean, if my perspective on trust is what everybody else has and what was written before, then forget it. There's no point in me researching trust. But I started reading everything I could. That's one thing that you get in your doctoral discipline of let's first find what else is out there. Every book that was written, every article, research article, books that had the title Trust on the cover that were about anything except trust. But I read them all. And I started looking at what is the definition. And then I sat down, I let this all incubate in my head, and I came back and I said, I have a different definition of trust. I have a different understanding of how trust behaves, and I have a different understanding of how people trust or make the decision to trust somebody else. The last part is actually I developed the process, which is a story by itself, because the story started with having nothing to do with trust, on how you form new habits that change old behaviors that build trust. And hopefully we'll have time to talk about that as well. But so what is trust? To me, I'll start with, why do we need trust? No risk, no reward, right? Everybody knows that. I mean, if you want a big reward, it's typically associated with a risk. If it wasn't associated with a risk, everybody will get it. Big reward comes with big risk. That's great, except we're not necessarily willing to take that risk because we have a risk tolerance bar. So what happens when I want a reward that comes with a risk that goes above my tolerance bar? I'm not willing to take that unless I trust someone to help me bridge the gap between the risk I have to take and the risk I'm willing to take. That's where I need trust. Now, let's apply this to the sales circumstances. I'm about to take, when we talk about sales are also financial services, right? So let's take a financial advisor, which is one of my target markets now, and that's a market where I speak. So I need to invest $1 million. Okay. What is the risk? I mean, what's the risk in investing $1 million other than, well, losing $1 million? So it's a pretty big risk. So I'm willing to benefit from getting whatever return on $1 million investment, but I'm not willing to take the risk unless there is a financial advisor, a money manager that I trust that will bridge that gap between the risk I have to take by investing $1 million and the risk I'm willing to take by investing $1 million. That is why trust is needed. But what is it? I'll give you the definition as it came in the Book of Trust. By the way, I should show you the Book of Trust too, because that's the biggest book ever written about trust, 550 pages. The only reason, by the way, it's 550 pages was because the publisher could not publish 570. So I had to shrink it a little. But this is where I first put the definition of trust as I see it. And that is, it's your willingness. And I'm going to put it in the sales context. And I kind of adopted it in the Trust Premium book. So it is the customer's willingness to accept the possible negative consequences of giving control over something they have, which typically is money, to someone or something else, expecting them to minimize those consequences. Think about it in the sales context. I'll go back to our financial advisor. So my willingness to put $1 million in their hands, my willingness to accept the negative consequences because I expect them to minimize those negative consequences, which means they have to know that I'm expecting, they have to be willing, and they have to be capable of bridging that gap. That's my definition of trust, specifically in this context, but it applies to other contexts as well.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. We as sellers do a lot of work to become, what we would call business advisors and value-centric selling and selling with emotional intelligence. And all of that is practices that give you the tools and capacity to speak to somebody who's making a decision with authority, with the ability to say, I think these are the right decisions, these are the risks, these are the rewards. And you're saying that they're trusting you. The implicit trust is that, okay, look, this software I'm going to buy, or this service that I'm going to buy, or these products that I'm going to buy for my business, they cost me, $1 million to bring into the business. I could put that $1 million into buying more, into purchasing more services, or another office building, or I could bring in more employees to help us grow faster. But I need to put this into technology, and they need to trust somebody to leverage them above their own risk ceiling to help them make that decision. And I think that makes sense in context of sales, but this is easier said than done. I think that you would agree that you're teaching something that is fundamentally easy to understand, because we all do this every single day. I mean, we do this with our meals. We do this with our cars. I mean, we trust a salesperson to sell us our cars. This is something that we all do, but practicing this is difficult. So how do you start to practice this so that you can repeat it with different people? Because all people are different. You're not going to come across the same. Dr. Yoram, you are one of one. You have a 550-page book on trust because you're the one who's written 13 books on trust. You are one person out of one. Getting you to trust me is a very different process than my producer over here and maybe another buyer and even myself. So how do you start to practice these things with repetition so that you can become skilled at it?
So 4 steps. The first one is learn. It's know. It's understand. Once you understand how trust works, and this is over the years, I observed 8 laws of trust. I didn't create them. I didn't invent them. I observed them. And one of them you just touched on. You said there is one person, there is another. Trust is personal. The same behavior that would cause one person to trust you could cause another person to distrust you. Same behavior, exactly the same behavior. So think about it. You have 2 customers. You exhibit a behavior. I mean, we both know that many salespeople follow a script, right? And the script is supposed to work. Well, it works on one, it causes the exact opposite on the others. And I'm still shocked at how many times I get the same phone call. And it's like, you don't get it. This does not work on everyone. So that's the first thing, is to understand that the behavior of trust. And I do that through the 8 laws of trust. The second part is the understanding of what makes one person trust another. What makes a customer trust a salesperson? So we start with the understanding that they're all different, plus a few other behaviors that trust exhibits. But then the second part is, and it's made of, to me, 6 components, 6 main components. 3 of them are the who you are. So, Jeb, before you interviewed me, I mean, you trust me. Why do I say you trust me? Even if this episode never gets aired, you are wasting an hour of your time plus, because you did some pre-work, because you're trusting me. What made you trust me? Well, you did some research and you found 3 things. You found my competence, you found that we have personality compatibility, and you found a symmetry in our relationship. Symmetry is the smaller one. Competence, personality, compatibility are bigger ones. That's before we even had the first interaction. So if I'm trying to sell something to someone and they're doing their research, or alternatively, and this is the 5th law of trust, trust is transferable. Through transferable trust, they hear about me, either through my ratings or rankings, either through referrals, either through references, or my reputation. They know something enough to establish I'm willing to talk. Then come the other 3 components, which are, what do I do during that interaction? First-hand impression, how do I do? How do I, the first one is positivity. The second is time, the amount of time that we spend and the intensity of the time. And the third one is the intimacy. So I always prefer, I get clients calling me all the time. Their first question is, how much do you charge for a keynote? And my first answer is, let's have a Zoom call first.
Yeah, right.
So you know why? Because you can see me. You can see my words, you can hear my tone of voice, and you can see my body language. There's absolutely no way, Jeb, that you will not sense the passion that I have for the topic when you look at me. So this is what happens during an interaction. So it comes down to, let's understand trust. Let's learn. Let's understand trust, understand how it works, understand what how one person trusts another one. The second part is to assess. Let's assess where I am. And there are several different ways. One would be to actually ask customers. Another is I create the general assessments in the industry. And if you read the Trust Premium, you saw that I did that for several industries, and I found the factor that creates the Trust Premium and Trust Preference. Then there is even me reflecting on myself. When I'm going to give you a list of 100 traits and ask you, how do you rank on all of them? And then I'm going to tell you where you are on the different components. We will identify something that you need to improve, something that's holding you back from being more trusted. And I focus on the negative more than the positive, simply because that's what customers do.
Right.
As you know, customers are 3 times more likely to post a negative review if they had a negative experience than to post a positive review if they had a positive experience. So if you can eliminate one negative thing, you're going to do wonders to your reputation and to the trust that the customer has in you. So we started by learning and understanding. We continued with assessing it. Now let's make a plan. How do I change this behavior? And this goes back into a 2012 story, which, if you want, I'll tell you, especially since you brought up NBC Universal.
I like it. No, tell us the story. It sounds juicy.
Okay, so I'll tell you the story. You twisted my arm after I tried to poke you a lot. But so here's what happens. 2012, I wasn't researching trust or anything. We were on our way back from New York. The last day we went to the Rockefeller Plaza. We watched the NBC Today show. So we saw all the hosts coming out, the anchors coming out. Then we went up to the second floor, the Experience store, where this was during the London Olympics of 2012. So we start buying things where 3 ladies approach me. One with heavy makeup. That was Madeleine Fernstrom. She's the nutritional expert. I didn't know her. And the other 2 with clipboards. And she looks at me and she says, do you want to be on the Today Show?
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm too important for this. Of course I want to be on the Today Show. What's the context? She says weight loss.
Oh no.
So I look down and I'm like, well, it's still the Today Show. What do you want me to do? And she said, I want you to, the third hour, we turn to the audience and we ask them if they have any questions. This is the nutritional section. So do you have any question that's worth putting it on air? Now, I'm not ready for this, and I'm starting to think it up. I'm like, oh, you know what? I do. I've been meaning to lose weight for I don't know how long. I know what I need to eat or can't eat. I know how much exercise I need. Knowledge is not the issue. How do you find the motivation? How do you build new habits? And she goes, oh, that's a great question. We're going to put you on air. They take me to the other room. They put some makeup on me, not as much as on her. They put me next to, in the other room, next to Sarah. I don't remember her last name. She turns to me. We have a question here from the audience. I ask my question. They give me this most generic answer that wasn't really helpful. I hope nobody from NBC is listening. But anyway, that day we're flying back home and I'm sitting at the plane and I'm thinking, wait a minute. If I'm right and knowledge is not the issue, motivation is, habits are. I'm not an expert on nutrition, but I just finished a PhD on motivation. Granted, it's motivation for creativity, but motivation is motivation. It's how do you motivate yourself to do things. I have a PhD on motivation. If I believe that what I said was right and it's all down to motivation and habits, why can't I figure it out? Jeb, by the time we landed in Dallas, I had a plan. The plan was to lose not 200 pounds, but to lose 32 pounds. I wasn't that big. To lose 32 pounds. It wasn't to lose it over 1 week. It was to lose it over 6 months. I lost 32 pounds over 6 months minus 3 days. I went to see my doctor. Because it was my annual my annual inspection, my checkup, and he said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "I lost weight." He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, I needed to lose 32 pounds. I lost 32 pounds." He asked me, "How did I do that?" I explained it to him. He said, "You have to write a book." My second book that I ever published back in 2012. Or 2014, the book actually came out in 2014, was called Worst Diet Ever. My wife, and I described what I did, and my wife asked me, why do you write a book about diet? I mean, this is so far from what you do. Years later, what I realized was that the framework that I developed there, which today I call and trademark Trust Habits, is a 7-step process that starts with you learn, you assess, you know what you have to change, you know the behavior, and then the steps that would help you form new habits that change all behaviors and build trust. Funny thing is, the James Clear came up with Atomic Habits several years after. I mean, I think his book came out in 2018. My book came out in 2012. But, I'm not as famous as he is. So it goes through the understanding how trust behaves, because if you don't understand it, you're not going to know what to change. So understanding it, assessing where you are and what you can fix, building a plan that would form those new habits, and then execute on that plan.
And I want to go to the industries, because you did a lot of research on industries, but that's a teaser, so don't get too excited. Before I get there, you talked about the 8 laws of trust, and you mentioned the 5th law of trust, but what are some of the, if you're going to reveal on a podcast, the most important laws of trust that people should understand, what would those be?
Well, I would say that all 8 of them are important, because they really talk about, again, the 8 laws talk about how trust behaves. So the first one is that trust is continuous. You know how we use the word trust in a sentence, like I trust you, I don't trust you. But the reality is I trust you to a certain degree. Right? So it's not yes or no, it's to a certain degree. The second one is trust is contextual. Same thing, same request, same need, different context, different results. Third one is it's personal. The fourth one is it's asymmetrical. Trust is asymmetrical. We think that if I trust you, you will trust me. No. I have my reasons to trust you or not trust you, and you have your reasons to trust me or not trust me, and they're not related. They're so indirectly related that you wouldn't believe. Number 5, trust is reciprocal. We already talked about that. The trust is transferable. Number 6 is trust is reciprocal. And again, it's not that I trust you and therefore you trust me. It's actually, and I'm not going to go too deep into that because it is less applicable to the sales context, because a salesperson doesn't need to try and make the customer trustworthy. But what I found was that if I show you that if I trust you and I show you that I trust you, you will behave in a trustworthy way, which is very important in organizations and in relationships. So that's number 6. Number 7, trust is dynamic. It changes all the time between interactions and during interactions. Number 8 is kind of, I can summarize it. It's not you, it's me. My trust in you is the product of your trustworthiness and my trustfulness, my willingness to trust people in general, your type of people in particular, so salespeople, financial advisors, or something that I lump, and we are the sum of our experiences. So what we experience over years causes us to trust or distrust a group of people, and that multiplied by your trustworthiness is how much I trust you. So you may be the most trustworthy person in the world in objective terms, and I still don't trust you. It's not you, it's me. I just don't trust people. And I have several stories that typically I tell in keynotes.
I think that this is a really important place to stick on for a moment, because we know this as salespeople every single day. If you do any outbound prospecting, if you do any sort of sales motion where you're meeting with people and maybe you're selling keynotes and you're trying to learn from folks, what you will understand, especially with keynotes, is that there have been a lot of companies that have hired somebody who have delivered a really poor experience, and they are burned by that. And you, as the seller, are not in competition with yourself or the last person they talk to. You're in competition with every single person they've interacted with over time. And if you'll notice back in this interview that you discussed that customers are 3 times more likely to share negative experiences than they are positive ones. Just go to any Yelp review form or go to any restaurant. They're all negative. You go to reddit.com, which is the most toxic place, maybe other than X or Twitter, if you want to call it that. It is always true that you're going to find the most negative things because people look for the negative. And trust is such a difficult thing to build. And so I love your process about these laws are so important to really understand. And when you read your book, you come to terms with there is a spectrum of trust. It is not a yes or no. It is a full spectrum that you have to work in and operate in to really get good at this process and be competent at it. And you mentioned industry. So now I want to get into industries. You did a lot of work about trust in industries. It's different for different industries. The key players, the different key points are different. Walk us through and the audience through, because there's so many salespeople in so many different industries. How can they apply these things to their world without possibly pissing somebody off that they thought it would work for?
Yeah. So I think, again, I'll step back for a second and take you through how did I end up with the research on trust premium, because that's the research you're talking about. And it happened with a friend of mine, Mark Hunter, that you know, and I think was on your show some time ago.
We love Mark, sales hunter.
This sales hunter, yes, the sales hunter. And he just moved from Nebraska to our chapter, our NSA, North National Speakers Association, North Texas chapter. It's also always better when I just say I'm a member of NSA.
Yeah.
And just leave it there. So Mark had come in here, and I was kind of welcoming him, and I took him out to lunch, and we talked. And I brought up something, a part of a study that I did. Well, I wouldn't even call it a study. It was really kind of a survey of 363 people, where the question I asked is, what is the most important quality for you in another person? And I gave 6 types of people. I gave them your boss, your employees, your peers, a salesperson trying to sell you something, your government representative, and your spouse. What is the most important quality? I started open-ended, then I closed it. 363 responses. The most important quality, 61.2% trustworthiness. The second one was willingness to work hard, especially when you ask leaders, intelligence, willingness to take risk. And finally, believe it or not, number 5, good looks. Put that aside. But 3 out of 363 thought that
darn it.
Number 1, the most important quality is good looks. And I didn't talk about sex at all. So, and then I figured the highest one was salespeople, 77.4%, more than spouse. Spouse was 77.2%, 77.4% salespeople. The most important quality for me in salespeople, 3 out of 4 people would answer with the word trust or trustworthiness. And I thought, you know what? It's great to just say it. How about if I see if you'll put your money where your mouth is? So I did a second survey. I gave this example of a house renovation project, $10,000 project. 2 salespeople come in. I did not say that one of them was trustworthy, the other one was not. I just described one of them with the characteristics that I know represent trustworthiness. You know, he's listening to you. He's not trying to get more money. You can see that he's attentive. You can see that he cares about you. The whole list of things that would represent a trustworthy person. The other one, you don't know anything about them. Then they come in with a proposal. And the proposal for both of them is $10,000. Which one will you hire? The one that you consider trustworthy. 100% of the time. Well, it was actually 98.3% of the time. There are a few people that say, I need more. It's not enough.
Right.
I need more. So, which is fair. This is kind of where I landed on what I call today the trust preference. So if price is the same, everything else is equal, price is the same, what is the probability you're going to go with the trustworthy one over the one you don't know? Not one that you actively distrust, that you have reasons to distrust, but one that you don't know. So 100% chose, or 98.3% chose the trustworthy one. Then I said, what if the trustworthy one is asking 10% higher price?
Yes.
98.3%. Ooh. How about 20% higher price? At this point, we're at about 58%, and then we're at 20-something percent. But you know, even at 20-something, when I said 50% higher price, I still had 21 or so percent said, I'm going to go with the trustworthy one. And I thought to myself, wait a minute. So first of all, what that represents on average is 29.6%. So people were willing to pay 29.6% higher price to buy from somebody they trust over somebody they don't know, when everything else is equal. Everything, you're getting exactly the same thing. And I thought that was interesting. But so I had lunch with Mark Hunter, and in that lunch, Mark says, I don't think anybody has ever researched it before, and I've been in the sales business for more than 30 years. And you're kidding me. Nobody has ever connected sales with trust or a premium? So not that I'm aware. So, you know, as a professor in university, I have access to all research articles, and I started looking for articles, research articles, that have the word sales or any derivatives and trust and any derivatives in the title. Now, typically, because these are such broad words, you would find like 35,000 articles.
Right.
I got 24. 24 articles came up. The latest one was...
I'm impressed you found 24.
The latest one was from 2008. The earliest was from 1916, a year before the U.S. entered World War I. And none of them has ever quantified it. And Mark was telling me, I think you're onto something. Nobody has done this research. That's when I started the research on Trust Premium. And so, but then the first thing that came to mind is, look, this cannot be the same number for every industry. So I started doing research in financial advisors and lawyers and accountants and insurance agents, a lot in the financial services and around it, the services business, but it applies to every industry. And what I started seeing is, first, the numbers were different. But the second thing is I started identifying factors that would affect the level of trust premium. So I'll give you a couple of those factors. One is the absolute, objective, negative consequences that might happen by choosing the wrong person. So, you know, I did that. I actually did do photographers, and I spoke in the annual conference of Professional Photographers of America. And I told him, think about this. If you are going to hire a photographer to do headshots, right, in the studio, and you hired the wrong photographer, you wanted to go for a lower price, you hired the wrong photographer, what's the worst that's going to happen?
You don't look as good as you could, right?
You lost $200.
Yeah.
You're going to do it again, or you don't look as good. You lost half a day of your time or a few hours. You're going to have to do it again. Maybe you don't have the pictures in time. That's it. How about a wedding photographer?
Yeah.
You went for low price. You didn't get the trustworthy one. He calls you 3 weeks later and says, the pictures I took? Well, I forgot to take the cap off the camera. So we actually don't have pictures from your wedding. The premium is different. So one component is the absolute objective consequences. Now, I emphasize the absolute objective because we mentioned that customers are different. And so it's one thing to say, what is the risk? It's another to say, how much am I afraid of the risk? Because even when that happens, there are going to be people who are going to say, oh my God, what do we do now? Do we do the wedding again? I mean, I don't know what mental breakdown, and there are going to be people who say, well, then I don't pay you. So what? So I don't have pictures from the wedding. That's fine. I'm still married. I have pictures from my wedding. I don't know that this is why my marriage lasted 31 years so far. I'm still married to my first ex-wife, by the way. So so there is the absolute consequences. That's an industry thing, like in the investment industry. So $1 million, you invest $1 million, you're going to lose $1 million. Then there is the personal. So I don't know what it means to you to lose $1 million, Jeb.
I would sweat a little bit. Yeah, I would have a tough time with losing $1 million.
I know it. I know I would. I know that Elon Musk would probably not.
Right.
So this is how the objective. I mean, objectively, we're all going to. Elon Musk and I are going to lose $1 million, but subjective, personally, it's going to hurt me a lot more than it hurts him. So that's another component, but that's a personal component. Back to the industry, your impact, your role in affecting the consequences. So take, for example, a financial advisor that actually makes the investment decisions. They are 100% in control of those decisions. The more they are in direct control of those consequences, the more premium you're willing to pay to get someone you can trust.
Right.
Take insurance agents. So for financial advisors, by the way, I found the premium to be 39.4%, almost 40% premium in the fees that you're willing to pay the financial advisor.
Oh, yeah.
To make sure that you hire somebody that you trust. Take insurance agent. At best, it was 5%. And with the caveat, you can't actually pay the insurance agent more because they're being paid by commissions from the insurance company. But the insurance agent themselves don't have a direct impact on the consequences of whether the insurance company will pay or not. That's the insurance company. So that lowers the premium. So I identified 10 such industry factors that affect the amount of the trust premium.
And people need to go read this section because it's not directly correlated. I mean, we're in the training and speaking industry, which is service based, and we can have crazy premiums if we really prove something right, or we could have no premiums at all. And that's the factors that you wrote about in your book aren't necessarily direct correlations to what we do, but there are lessons to learn, and you can identify the premiums yourself. And I think that from a trust perspective, and as a professional B2B seller, you may only have 3 meetings. You may only have 6 meetings. If you're in big enterprise, you might have a year and a half, and that's a very different conversation. But when you are a seller and you have 3 calls, right, to close a deal, and otherwise it's just going to go on forever, and that this is just not going to work out. The math doesn't work out for you in terms of time, and you want to build trust really quickly. How in practice, and just the last question I have is, can a business-to-business seller build trust fast without overplaying their hand because it's not reciprocal? and all of those laws that you talked about is transferable. Maybe they don't have maybe they don't have a referral, but they need to get it done to sell at a higher premium. How can people do this quickly in a sales process?
So actually, beyond keynotes, I do workshops and I have programs, online programs, where this is exactly what we focus on. Again, you start with learning and understanding and then assessing and knowing what you have to change. Now, I think one of the first steps is realizing that different customers are different. There are some rules that I put in the book, and I don't want to call them rules. So they're let's call them habits or behaviors that
guidelines
generally build trust. So let's just say that they're more likely to build trust in more people than more customers than in others. B2B, by the way, was one of my strengths because that's what I did a lot. My customers, when I was in Texas Instruments, were Apple and Sony and Panasonic and some of the major corporations. It was all B2B. And the importance of your understanding of the customer, the importance of I think that even when I reached out to you, Jeb, it was through an introduction by Mark Hunter. You already know Mark Hunter. So I use the fifth law of trust to build an initial level of trust of you in me through using the transferable trust. So one or more of the 4 R's: the reviews, reputation, references, and recommendations. So in this case, it was a recommendation, was a personal recommendation. So there are certain things that you do even before the first interaction. You don't want to go to the first interaction when the customer has no, pardon my language, no freaking idea who you are. You don't want to go in that way. You want to know them well enough. Sometimes it's amazing when you go in and you realize that you both went to the same school or you have kids in the same school. With all the information that's available to you, it's unbelievable how much I know about you before we ever met the first time. So now you got to be careful with that because, one thing that you can do is I can find out where your property is, where your home is, what is the value of your home, how much do you pay in property taxes. That's public information. But, starting a conversation with, hey, Jeb, so how is that $1.15 million house you live in where you pay property taxes of 28.3%? And how exactly are you getting the homestead exemption if you have the other property? Hey, I can find this. That's not a good way to start a sales call. I know where your kids go to school. That's not a good way to start a sales call. But hey, I noticed that you went to SMU and I went to SMU. Did you have Dr. Choi as one of your professors? That is. Now, another one of especially in B2B is this, but not only, is the whole concept of the customer is always right? There are generations of salespeople that were raised on the customer is always right. We're going to tell the customer exactly what he or she wants to hear. Well, when I was at TI, we had a major customer. I mean, this was a major customer. This was a customer that represented about, I think, 40% of the entire company's revenue. And they had someone there who was choosing components, and he was an obnoxious person, really obnoxious person. Everybody hated him in our company because he was like, I'm the customer, I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And so one day we're having dinner. And he says, Yoram, you're the only person at TI that I really enjoy having technical discussions with. Like, well, not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing.
You're like, wait. No, don't say that.
I'm like, why is that? He said, I know that I'm very demanding and very forceful and all. And everybody in your company are so afraid for their jobs if they lose our account that whenever I'm telling them what I need or what I want, they're going, oh, we're going to do that. We'll find a way to do that. We'll do that. And you're the only one who has absolutely no problem saying, hey, what you're asking for is bullshit. You're the only person that can say that to me with straight face and tell me what I need to hear, even though I wanted something else. And I really appreciate that. So that's another example. However, remember, not all customers are the same. There are customers that really needed to be petted and told exactly what they want to hear, and fine. But it starts with, if you don't focus on understanding the customer before and during, reading their body language, seeing, reflecting on it, then you're going to use the wrong tactics on a customer. I'll give you another example, and this goes back to the trust premium. We talked about the fact that at least financial advisors' trust premium was 39.4%. Insurance agents was less than 5%. Lawyers was 33.2%. So our willingness to pay a higher fee or price to someone who we trust over someone we don't know. But there's the flip side of it, which I call the distrust discount or the no trust discount. So someone can take away your customer if they offer the right discount. And those two numbers are attached. So 39.4%, I'm going to get a customer because they trust me over someone they don't know. 28.5%, that other competitor who they don't know lowers their price by 28.5%, is when the customer says, maybe I do need to switch. This only brings them to that line that maybe I do need to switch. Salespeople are so focused on selling on price. I can't get the deal, I'll lower the price. I remember once I was working for a technology company back in Silicon Valley, and we met with one of the major, we were building modems, okay? And those modems, really the components for those modems were a few dollars per computer.
Right, they're fairly cheap.
The manufacturer was one of the top 4 PC manufacturers in the world. We walk into their offices in Houston, and the first thing that their director of purchasing says, hardware purchasing says, is we bought from you 10 million modems last year, and it cost us $10 million in support. Just so that you know. Well, our VP of sales immediately says, what if we lower the price? What if we give you a 50-cent discount? It's kind of split it. So it's half here, half there. You save $5 million. Now it's going to become $5 million. I'm going, wait a minute. Why? What are you spending the $10 million on? And what we realized was that maybe 3% were spent on bad modems. 97% were on, this is the early days. You remember when you connected to the internet with a modem where the connection sounded like beep, beep, beep. You remember those days? Yeah. So customers that did not realize that the computer needed to be connected to the telephone line, that nobody else can be on the line, that you actually need an internet service provider account. They didn't know that. Or the modem was not set up correctly. And I thought about it and I said, wait a minute, what if we built a piece of software that would go with our modems that would be able to analyze why this is not working, help the customer solve their own problem with pictures and everything and drawings. And eventually, if this is like you need to call a service provider, here is a list of service providers. By the way, you can have service providers pay you to put their names in that list. And he's like, this would be brilliant. And I'm like, and we're going to charge you 50 cents per modem, an extra 50 cents per modem. So we ended up a deal that was 50 cents above what we came in with and solved the customer's problem. But that was because my approach was not, let's lower the price. If they have a price issue, let's lower the price. My approach was, how do we bring more value? Because the value we brought was way more than the 50 cents that we charged for.
I love that, and I love the correlation between distrust and price, and trust and price, and I think we started this conversation with trust bridges the gap between a person and their risk ceiling to making a decision that's risky, and this is a really great foundation for building trust. You have this wonderful book out, The Trust Premium, but Dr. Yoram, where should people go to connect with you, learn from you?
Trusthabits.com. They can go to trusthabits.com. One thing they can do is go to the Trust Show podcast. You mentioned it at the beginning. I have a podcast. It has, I think, 183 or 184 episodes now. In this current season, this is season 16, I'm actually reading parts from the Trust Premium book and explaining them. But the best way is just to go trusthabits.com or Yoram Solomon, SOLOMON.com.
Awesome. You are amazing. Thank you so much for your insights. It was a pleasure learning from you. And thank you for joining us on the Sales Gravy Podcast.
Thank you, Jeb.
Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.